What's good, everyone? We have an OG on the show. We have Dr. Leif with Physician on Fire. Dr. Leif, what's up? Welcome to Docs Outside the Box again and again and
Thank
again.
you, Nee. It's always good to be back talking to you. Hopefully we get to do it in person sometime soon. But for now, this will do.
So, short story, everyone. Me and Dr. Leif met back in 2016. We were talking about it right when his blog was very young, right when my blog or my podcast was extremely young. And we met at a bar. I was doing locums at Green Bay. You had to remind me.
Yeah,
And just amazing how it's almost 7 years ago now, right?
yeah. And
Definitely.
I remember I was over there because I did I think it was a Spartan race or Tough Mudder, one of those things the
Yeah.
day before, and I had injured my shoulder. I had separated it like 3 times, and I was like, I think I just need to get home. You're like, oh, please, man, just come on through. It's not too far out of your way. It's like, yeah, he's right. He's right. It'll be worth it. And yeah, we've been friends ever since.
And
Yeah.
the rest is history. Post call, I
Mm-hmm.
did it, and it was
Mm-hmm.
one of the longer lasting relationships that I really appreciate from you, and appreciate from because I think there's like virtual relationships that I think I got introduced to through this podcasting, and I think definitely you are one of the earlier folks who I've developed like this virtual friendship with, where we talk. And there's oftentimes where I've come to you for advice on the podcast and the website and things like that, and I really appreciate it. And I oftentimes talk with folks on the show and talk to the listeners and say that there's a lot of things that we can learn from each other. I just call it virtual mentorship,
Sure.
where you can surround yourself with people who are positive. They're doing interesting things in what you're doing. You may not get a chance to physically be around them, but listening to them or reading their blogs, you develop this type of relationship with people. And I definitely feel that connection with you. And I just want to say thank you very much for being involved in my professional career, podcasting career. I'm getting sappy on you. Stop me, cut me off before I get even more sappier. But
Well,
thank
I
you
will
very
thank
much.
you for your friendship, and also for having so many different guests on. And I've certainly learned from you and from many of your guests who have done all kinds of amazing things, in
Oh,
and
yeah.
outside of medicine.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Mm.
listen, you are, as always, the go-to spot where I want to learn something new about finances. And let's be honest, we are recording this May 31st. It looks like, by the numbers standpoint, we're in a recession, or pretty damn near close to it. Stocks are going down, which could be a good thing depending on how you look at stocks, right? Could be at a
Yeah, although
discount.
we're up like 8% in the last 6 trading days before today. So, it's bouncing back, but that is kind of a natural part of even a downturn, is that
Absolutely.
volatility. So, yeah, yeah.
There's
And
volatility going
yeah,
on.
oh, yeah.
Confidence, inflation is going up. Confidence is going down. But there's something that I found on your website, I'd say the middle of last year, and I probably should have found it sooner, that I'd like you to come and talk to us about. It's
Of
these things
course.
called Treasury I Bonds. And I think it's really important because everybody from attending level down to, I'd say, even residents, even med students, whoever has some amount of money may want to consider doing this with their money. So why don't we jump into this? What are Treasury I Bonds? Why should we consider it? Talk to us about that.
Sure. So the US Treasury issues different types of bonds. There are EE bonds, there are Series I bonds, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And I bonds are a pretty interesting bond that's strongly tied to inflation. And so
Mm.
it earns you an interest rate, and that interest rate changes every 6 months. And it just so happens that, as you know, because you fill your gas tank and you go buy groceries, that inflation is hitting us pretty hard. And this is one way we can kind of be rewarded, is by buying I bonds, because as inflation rises, so does the interest rate on these bonds. And right now they're paying 9.62% annualized for the
Mm.
6 month period from when you buy them. And as long as you buy before November, you'll get that interest rate for the first 6 months, and then it will reset. And we'll know what it resets to sometime in November for the next 6 months, for your second 6 month period. Long story short, when I bought in, and it was my first time because I was not familiar with these until inflation finally came to life. Back when I was a toddler, in the late 70s, early 80s, we had inflation in the 10, 12% range for a few years. I don't remember that. It didn't affect me, right? I had Weeble Wobbles and Legos, and I wasn't paying attention to what the price was. So now that I'm a grown up and we have almost double digit inflation, it's like, oh yeah, okay. What can we do about this? And one thing you can do is buy yourself a little bit of I bonds.
So is this the same type of thing? I don't know, but I mean, we're similar age, but I remember my dad bought me like these bonds, right? That were paper. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, here, like I bought you like, $100 worth of bonds and stuff. And like,
Yeah.
it takes like 25 years for it to mature. Is this the same type of thing? You buy it from the government and like everybody always laughed at this. Like there really wasn't anything. Is
Same
that the same
type
thing?
of thing. And I had a couple of those. I had one that I got from high school graduation. My
Your
wife had
grandmother
one
buy
or
you one, your
two.
aunt buy you one or something?
I think they were Series EE, if I remember. And we actually cashed them in because they stopped earning interest after 30 years. And so, like, my high school graduation one was just about ready to no longer earn anything. And you can just go to the bank and cash those in. So you can still get paper I bonds with your tax refund. If you overpay your taxes, you can put up to $5,000 from that overpayment. Instead of taking the cash refund, you can get a paper I bond up to $5,000 worth. And then there's also a limit per person. You can only do $10,000 per year when you buy I bonds.
That's the
So
caveat.
there's no, unlimited amount, which is really too bad because, you can't treat it like a savings account. Right now, I bonds paying 9.62% annualized for 6 months. So your $10,000 I bond purchase for yourself and your spouse, if you have one, can also make that purchase, and you can do it each calendar year. You're going to earn what's half of 9.62, like 4.81%. So $481 in 6 months on that 10 grand,
Which is
which is
definitely
pretty
better.
good,
Which is better than what a bank is giving you right now, or even a
My
CD.
gosh, like 10 times what even a high yield. Let me get my both fingers in there. Air quotes
You remember
if
those
you're not
days?
watching.
You remember those days? I don't know if you remember I'd say like the late 2000s. Like I remember in 2010, 11, when they had high yield savings account, like Immigrant Bank would have something like in the 4% range, 5% range.
I remember buying CDs with like the money I made at the grocery store as a 17, 18-year-old, and maybe 5.5, 6% on
Yeah.
those short-term CDs. But yeah, those days are gone. But as the Fed also starts to raise interest rates, which they've done a little bit and plan to do a bit more of, maybe we'll see a few percent again, which is
So, so,
something.
so overall, just 30,000 foot view. This is a bond that you're buying directly from the U.S. government. This is an IOU, basically.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
have a maximum of up to $10,000 that you can purchase. And based on the inflation rate and the calculation that you can let us know about, I don't know too much about it, but basically it's when you purchase this bond, let's say $5,000 or even $10,000, you're earning about a 9% yield on it. That's
Yeah.
paid annually, you said, right?
It deposits in your account, I think, twice annually. But interestingly, you don't pay taxes until you actually cash the bond out. So that's different than how most bonds work. They pay a yield out in cash and you pay taxes because you took it. And as a doctor, that kind of stinks because interest income is taxed like ordinary income. It's at your highest, your marginal rate, your tax rate. So that might be 35%, 37% for a lot of physicians. But with an I bond, it just gains value without paying anything out, without giving you the cash. So it accumulates value. It basically stays in the account, kind of like an IRA. When you do eventually cash out, and another caveat, another potential downside, if you do so within 5 years, you lose the most recent 3 months worth of interest. Once you're at 5 years that you've owned it, then you no longer have any penalty for removing early. Now,
Okay.
3 months worth of interest is something, but still, when you're getting this high of an interest rate, it's probably worth doing, even if you plan to cash out in 2 or 3 years. Another caveat is for the first year, your money's locked up. You can't get it out
Right.
until
So
one
that's
calendar
a
year
big
after you put it in. So it's not really a great emergency fund
right.
type of an investment, at least not initially.
Right. And
For that
that's
first
what I was
year.
going to get to is like, if this is something that if you need your money in a year, don't put it in here because the government ain't trying to hear that. They're not giving it back to you.
Yeah. A
But
year and a day, you're
afterwards,
okay.
after a
364
year,
days? No.
got you. So you said a year and a
Yeah.
day, you can get your
Yeah.
money back. But if
Yeah.
you, even if you cash it out within 5 years, you'll lose the last 3 months of interest.
Right. Right. So I did my first investments in November for my wife and for me, and then again in January for my wife and for me. And we got 7.12% for the first 6 months and now 9.62%. And the weighted average there works out to like 8.54. So we'll get about 8.5%, 8.5% for the first year. But if I were to cash out one day after, I bought them, instead of 8.54, I'd get 3/4 of that. Doing the mental math, somewhere around 6.5 to 7% instead of the full 8.5 because I withdrew early. But I'll probably hang on to these for 5+ years. But it kind of depends on what happens with inflation. I mean, if we see
so what happens?
deflation,
That's what I
these
want to know.
things will start to lose money. Your account will actually drop a little, and you don't want that. I mentioned that it's tied to inflation. There's also a base rate. That base rate is 0, and it hasn't been above 2% for like 20 years. But
so there's no chance that you can use your
base.
principal that you invested in.
Well, since we know it's going to go up 8.5% in the first year, at least for my investments that happened, before the rate just reset. I mean, I know I'll be up that much. You'd have to have pretty serious deflation, and you can see that coming, right? Every month the Fed releases it's called the CPI.
What is that,
the
man? I don't
number
know
it's based on. It's the consumer price index, and I believe the U is for urban. So it's cost of stuff in grocery stores and cities, I believe, for the most part. Not just groceries, obviously, but they factor in gasoline and housing and a whole bunch of basically a weighted average of what people spend money on.
So who would you recommend this for? How is Leif using this? Well, let's start with there. How are you using this in your portfolio? Because I know you're big on index funds, you're big on real estate, you're big on, entrepreneurship and so forth. So, we're talking about the 401ks, we're talking about the IRAs, we're talking about all these other types of tax deferral type things that I'm assuming you're maxing out first. Where does this fit in a portfolio for you? And then let's talk about other people who are listening.
Yeah. So I hold this just outside of any tax advantage account because it's inherently tax advantaged already. When you do cash out, you're not going to pay state or local income taxes on it. That's the advantage of federal bonds. And if you have income in the lower range of the spectrum, it'd be really below a physician's income, but I think it goes up to about 150,000 if you're married and taxable income. You can cash out and use the money for education for your kids and not pay federal taxes either. So if you might be someone that's going to retire early, or you had kids later in life, like my friend Dr. Nee, maybe you'll be in those lower tax brackets, and you can actually get a really nice tax advantage. This is better than a 529 in that case, so.
Okay. Yeah. Now let's say for the residents who are out there listening, right. And they're the student loans, they're already trying to get an emergency fund and so forth. We've already discussed that, hey, like the emergency fund needs to be very, very liquid. This is not going to be liquid for at least a year.
Right.
But I do know that there are certain people, when they get to a certain level of their emergency fund, they start doing some interesting things with it, right? Like, let's say your emergency fund needs to be, let's say $20,000. I'm just making up a number, right? The likelihood of them needing $20,000 immediately, like in 24 to 48 hours, is very low. They may end up needing $1,000 of it, or they may end up needing 5,000. So what people sometimes do is they kind of ladder it. Like they put 5,000 in a place where they can get it in 48 hours. And then the rest of the $15,000 may be, in a CD or certificate of deposit. Would something like this benefit someone who's trying to maybe kind of get a little bit more, let's say a little bit more yield on their emergency fund, or maybe they're saving up for a house and it's going to take them a year or more figuring out? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. CDs often work similarly in that you can get a decent interest rate, not right now, but we were just talking beforehand, I remember CDs of 5.5%, 6% back when I was younger. And
We're not gonna talk about our ages though, but
yeah,
yeah, we
right.
get it.
When I had a little more hair here on my head, but yeah. So as a resident, you probably don't have $10,000 lying around, right?
Right.
To put into something like this, and
But you don't have to invest all $10,000, right? You could
no,
do
true.
like
That's just
you
the
could do like
maximum.
500 or something like that, or
you could, yeah. You have to decide if it's worth the hassle, and we can certainly talk about that too. But it has a role, certainly. So in my portfolio, it's part of my bond allocation. I like to keep about 10% of our net worth in bonds and or cash, and this is certainly doing a lot more for me than cash is right now. Sitting earning 0.6% in my Ally savings account, which is not very exciting. So
the rest of that money is going into their commercials that they have on TV.
Yeah,
you can thank them for that.
But I think they're a great online bank.
Yeah,
works well for me. Anyway, so it's part of your bond allocation, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, it would be difficult to make it all of your bond allocation. Although, if you're like me and you're doing 90-10, and you start, say you're younger, you start now, you buy 10,000 for yourself. If you're married, another 10,000. That's 20,000 in bonds every year. If you're investing 100,000, that's 20% of your investments that year, right? So it's a significant amount. You'd have to invest 200,000 altogether to make that 20 grand only 10% of your investments. So I definitely heard the argument that it's just not worth the time and effort. Which,
let's get into that.
It takes 20 minutes. You did it. I made it
was very quick. On your blog, you kind of the pictures and you walk everybody right through it. It literally took me 20 minutes.
And it takes maybe 20 minutes. Took longer because I had to take the screenshots and then save them and then put them on a website. But you could probably do it in 10, 15 minutes, unless you're one of the unfortunate few who have to get this signature guarantee thing to prove your identity. And I hear that happening to a small but not trivial percentage of people.
It happened to Dr. Renee. So she had to go to her bank. She had to they had to put a stamp on her bank, and then we had to send it to the government, and just to prove who she is. But I'm interested. You mentioned that there's some folks who are saying that it may not be worth the effort putting whatever amount into this, and although it's giving you a good yield. Talk to us about that. Why would some people think that?
Well, it is quote unquote only $10,000, which, if you're a multimillionaire, maybe it's okay. It's going to be, less than 1% of your portfolio. But, looking at it from how much you're investing each year, it can be, easily 10 or 20% of what you're investing each year. And I guess, there are other ways you can get money in there too, besides just yourself as an individual and your spouse as an individual. If you have children, you could also put money in an account for them. Now, I haven't done that. I haven't thought that hard about it, but I'm not quite ready to start that transfer of wealth, estate planning kind of stuff.
Because that would kind of almost be like a gift.
Yeah. And I don't think it counts as a gift until they cash it out or you cash it out for them. They're children. They can't just access the money. But I don't know. It creates another kind of estate planning, kind of something to think about down the road. Is it your money still? Is it their money now? And once they turn 18, they can take it if they want. What
happens with, do you know how that gets incorporated with like college tuition and financial aid and so forth?
I don't, but my expectation is that, the FAFSA that you have to fill out, it's asset based to some extent. It's not just income based. And so I don't plan on our kids getting any non-merit aid anyway. But I'm sure if they have money in their name in an I bond, that's probably going to be looked at too.
What about Physician on Fire LLC? Has Physician on Fire LLC, the institution, has it bought I bonds?
That is a great question, because it could start an account and buy I bonds. I treat the business as a pass-through business. I don't keep money in it. It doesn't invest money. The only money that sits in Physician on Fire LLC's coffers is in a checking account, and it's a small amount. And whenever it reaches a threshold, it goes to me and I use it. So I haven't wanted to muddy
And by
the
the way,
waters.
let me know when you need an
either.
administrator on there. I can help you out with that. If you need
Is
an
that
administrator,
right?
yeah, just give me a password. I got you, man.
Right. Yeah, there's this term called embezzlement. I don't know if we want to go that route. No, we're good. But that is another option. And some people have businesses, that do retain earnings and keep a balance sheet. I typically do not to any extent. But so there are ways to do more than 10,000 per year, more than the 20 per couple. And myself, I learned about these last year at some point. It became kind of a hot topic in the fall when the CPI numbers were high, and we realized, it's going to pay 7% annualized for the next 6 months. So I bought myself and my wife 10,000 each in November and again in January. So within about 6 weeks time, I had maybe 8 weeks, $40,000 in I bonds, which is not insignificant, especially when only 10% of my assets are in bonds. Now that's maybe 10% of the bond allocation or something like that.
So I think what's really interesting about this is the way how I look at it is every time I give advice to younger professionals, specifically those in med school, PA school, and so forth, I just say, look, you always want to you work so hard, your money might as well work just as hard also. Mm-hmm. And the way how I look at this is this going to push the needle towards financial independence? No. Right. But I think what this does is it just serves as another avenue where you can have your money kind of just work for you, while you sleep or whatever, every 6 months or something like that. So I think it's a good exercise for younger professionals to use. They don't have to put $10,000 in. If you don't have it, it's fine. I still recommend paying off your student loans in a responsible way. I still, recommend putting money into your IRA, your Roth, or if you don't qualify for a traditional IRA, all of those different things I recommend that you do. But this is just another way where you can have, some money that you don't, I just say non-dispensable money that you don't need at the moment within a year to kind of get, do some more work for you. And then afterwards you can decide what you want to do for it. So that's the way I kind of look at it.
It's a way to optimize, and it's an extremely safe way. It's a guaranteed a return as you're going to get, right? It's from the U.S. government. The U.S. government's never really truly defaulted on its debt, and if it does,
I don't know.
We will be in a world of hurt, and we won't. It's not going to be the I bonds that we care about. It's canned
safer than
food,
crypto,
ammo, quote unquote stable coins. Terra Luna blow up recently was interesting to follow. So
I'm gonna have you come back on and talk about crypto, because it's just like, man, it's a lot going on with I was watching a sports show and one of the retired sports person was like, look, once your grandmama hears about something, it's too late. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And like with crypto, I don't know what to say about that, but I think definitely I agree with you. This is probably the safest thing that you can invest in at this point, with what's going on. So why don't we just kind of round the bases again? Just overall, an I bond is a bond that you buy from the government. The pros are, and you mentioned in your blog, the pros are the interest rates and how they're treated. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah. They're going to be tied to inflation. So really good right now, but they could level out, as we hope they will, because we want inflation to level out, right? Yeah. We don't want I bonds to stay at 10% for the next 5 years.
I don't want $7
That
milk.
would be a disaster. Exactly.
Right.
I just paid over $4 for a gallon. I didn't like that much. So it's tied to inflation, but it's good. It's good rate right now, and it'll be reset every 6 months, every November, every May, based on what inflation has done over the prior 6 month period. And the interest will not be taxed until you cash out. If you do cash out within 5 years, you lose the last 3 months of interest.
So that's the tax benefit right there. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So tax deferral, but also state and local income tax free. So if you're in New York City, you're not going to have to pay the state of New York tax on it, or the almost 4% city tax too.
Bro. Yeah, it's crazy. That's why I stay across the bridge in Jersey, but that's still high anyway. So and then the cons are you got to hold on to it for a year, right? If that's really considered a con, but you got to hold on to it for a year.
Illiquid
for a year. Some people think it's not worth it. We briefly went over that, particularly for the higher net individuals. I think it really makes sense for the higher net individuals to be like, it doesn't really make that much sense in the whole scheme of things.
Right.
But I think
if you got $10 million, maybe it doesn't move the needle for you. It just doesn't make a difference. But and of course you only can buy them from from the Treasury Direct website, right? You can't go on Vanguard and say search for I bonds, click buy. You have to set up a new account, a new password, and they've got kind of a funky system there. And you might have to do the guarantee that you had to do that Renee had to do, I should say. So,
right.
Yes. So that's another, a little bit of friction there in terms of buying them. I mentioned that you can do the refund and get that as a paper I bond, I guess. I've never seen one. I've seen the old Series EE bonds that we talked about.
So if you feel like you have a big refund gummy, just use that you can use 5,000 to buy additional.
Yeah. And per person. So if you and a spouse had both overpaid on taxes and are owed a refund of up to 5,000, you could put that towards an I bond. But the ones that I bought, that you bought, they're just electronic, right? You're not going to see a paper bond. You don't have to worry about losing that piece of paper. It's all tracked on the Treasury Direct website.
And everyone who's listening, who is thinking, I'm really interested in this. I want to learn more about it. And I want to know how to do this. Dr. Leif, Physician on Fire, has an amazing blog post that describes everything about what we talked about, expands on it, but also goes through the screenshots of all the things that you need to do to literally buy them. And like he said, it took me 15, 20 minutes to do it. And even though with Renee, we had to do an extra additional step, once we got that step done, it was really quick afterwards. So
yeah, cool.
Dr. Leif, tell them again how people can follow you. I know it's pretty plain as day, but I want you to say it. How can they follow you?
Good. Yeah. Well, I'll mention, just to find that article, it's physicianonfire.com/buy-I-bonds. So pretty simple. Physician on Fire, I bonds. So you can find me at Physician on Fire. If you don't, if you have fumble fingers like I do and you misspell physician half the time, just type in POfire.com. You'll get to me. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, and I've got a couple of Facebook groups, Physicians on Fire, Fat Fire. We got tens of thousands of people on each of those talking about money stuff all day long. So yeah, I am out there. I'm online and I'm easy to find.
And make sure you let people know, how long have you been fire for now? I
left my anesthesia job in 2019, 3 summers ago. I was FI about 4 to 5 years before that.
And you ain't looking back?
Nope, I have not seen an OR in just about 3 years, and I'm okay with that.
Awesome. So guys, not only are you learning about I bonds, but you also get an exposure to a physician who's doing amazing things and decided to make, your legacy be making sure that doctors from a financial standpoint are really healthy and able to change their family tree, which is what me and Renee have been able to do based off of your website. So I appreciate that. That's dope. Everybody, make sure you check out Dr. Leif's blog on I bonds. If you didn't catch what he said, the link is going to be in the show notes. Leif, thank you again for coming on Docs Outside the Box, man.
Of course. Always happy to talk to you and see you.
Peace.
Peace.